Good morning, everybody. Welcome here this morning. We're very happy to have Scott D. and Rachel Stika Jensen. I did say it right, okay. She's 3 years into practice at Pipestone, and Scott's been around for generations. Well, not decades, I'll say, not generations. Okay, but thank both of you for being here this morning to lead us. The seminar this morning is to share the results of on-farm application of Next Generation Biosecurity protocols across a large segment of U.S. industry, as well as describe preliminary observations from a wean-to-market biosecurity plan designed to mitigate local PRRS introduction and regional spread. We hope you will leave this seminar with a list of new ideas that you can put into effect on your farms. So join me in welcoming these people.
Thanks, Roger. Hi, everybody. How you doing? Thanks for coming. What a big crowd for 9 o'clock in the morning. I'm impressed. I'm impressed. So as Roger mentioned, I'm Scott, and I'm tag teaming with Rachel. We'll let her introduce herself when she's ready to come up. But I'm going to start it off, talk about the south side of things, and then Rachel's going to talk about the wean-to-market on the biosecurity side. And we're going to be as brief as we possibly can so we can get as much discussion as we can. So we really hope you take this as your meeting, and that you want to ask questions or argue and debate. You can see it's a fairly controversial topic, right? And you see there's a question mark at the very end of the title. And I'm just wondering if you think that's true or not. And so we'll show you some things we've been doing at Pipestone. I'm no longer with the company, but I'm still working a bit more as a consultant with them. I spent 12 years there. 12 years prior to that, I was a professor at the University of Minnesota College of Vet Med. 12 years prior to that, I was a swine practitioner in Morris, Minnesota, so I might be one of the older people in the room. So I'm really glad to be here. And I thank Joe Russler for the invitation. So is the reign of terror over? I'm going to pose that question to you, and we'll see what you think. You know, I know it's a really tough time for you all in the pork industry right now, and I really feel bad. I remember 2008, and I know this looks like it's worse, you know, looking at the economics. So it's great you're here, but one of the things we want to do for you is bring you good news in a tough time. I hope you come out of this meeting feeling very optimistic about the progress that's been made with this terrible disease. But I wish you all the well as you get through the rest of this downturn. So good news at a tough time. All right, this is preaching to the choir. You all know about PRRS. Maybe what you don't know is the estimates of its cost now. The annual cost was always calculated at, say, $600 million a year, okay? Gordon Spronk from the Pipestone Group, he's got a different level of cost. Looking at some very recent data with these new strains of the virus, Gordon thinks it's $1 billion a year that this thing is costing us now. So he thinks it's more expensive. I would agree with him. And you know, we're really not doing well controlling PRRS. This is the University of Minnesota Swine Health Monitoring Project, named in honor of the great Bob Morrison, who started this a long time ago, actually in 2009. You're probably familiar with it. This is the participants report their PRRS outbreaks every week. The university calculates the incidence, or the percent of infection, which you see on the y-axis and on the x-axis over time. Each of those lines is a year, a cumulative year of all the participants. And there's about half the sows in the United States participating in this. But what you see here is you don't see much change. It's not going really down, it's going up. You know, year after year after year since 2009, we're not making much progress. That's not good. And at Pipestone, I put a little note there in the bottom there. Our incidence or percentage of annual infection of new viruses coming into our farms since this report started was 30 to 50%. That's a lot of disease. That's not good. That's kind of where a lot of the other systems are at. So that kind of sets the stage for kind of where we are. We're not doing very good. And I get a little bit preachy sometimes and on the soapbox, but I really think we have to consider a little change of mindset here. I call this the PRRS reign of terror. You can see it's been terrorizing us and holding us hostage for all these years. It's telling us what to do, you know. It's time for that to change. We need to take control of this disease. And we think we've got some ways we can get that done, and that's what we're trying to share with you today. But the reign of terror, I believe, is over. See what you think. Okay, now how are we going to do this? We're going to do this with just really good biosecurity, nothing real rocket science. We're going to take science-based biosecurity protocols in a program we call Next Generation Biosecurity. We're going to take biosecurity protocols that reduce the risk of what we call the direct routes. That's pigs and semen. So we're going to start with a negative breeding stock source and a negative semen source. Then we're going to focus on the mechanical routes, trucks, people, fomites, supplies, those types of risk factors, which we know are true. PRRS virus can enter farms indirectly through those routes. Then we're going to look at aerosol transmission. We know the virus can travel in the air, and now we know it goes in the feed. So we're going to take biosecurity protocols across all of those routes. We're going to put them in a program. We're going to apply it in a standardized fashion across a farm or a farm system. And we're going to measure to see what happens with the percentage of new infections every year. So next generation biosecurity is next generation because the old way we used to do things is we'll try this, we'll try that, we'll do this, we'll do that, kind of piecemeal. Here we're going to put it all together in a program. And we're going to audit that program, and we're going to make it standardized, and we're going to really test to see whether this works. Okay, so let's look at the mechanical routes. We'll start with those first. I think everyone understands pigs and semen. You got to have negative pigs and semen. But what do I mean by mechanical routes? If you remember the snowball from hell study we did, where we took the virus, we put it in snow, we attached it to a vehicle, we drove it all around. We showed we could mechanically move this virus very easily through vehicles. We could easily move it through the boots of people. We could walk it into barns. Supplies could get contaminated in those barns. And this virus was very easy to move around accidentally. You know, this was work back in 2000, 2001. So it sounds very elementary now. But back in those days, it was kind of earth-shattering stuff. So we published that. And what happened? How did the industry respond? Well, we put a lot of interventions in farms now. Many of these are being used on your farms, I imagine. The research did one thing, first of all. It raised the awareness that this risk is true. It was scientifically validated that you could move the virus around through dirty trucks, through dirty boots, through contaminated supplies. So we started studying real hard on transportation sanitation. How do we properly clean a transport vehicle? What disinfectants do we use? How long do we use them? That's all very well validated now. Then we looked at personnel entry, shower in, shower out, Danish entry, both very effective in reducing viral entry. Boot benches, simple little things like boot benches. As you walk into the farm, you take off your shoes, you're wearing shoe covers as you can see there, you spin around and you go into the shower. Very, very basic stuff. But in those early days, nobody really thought of that. And then the supplies, the contaminated supplies, led to the development of what we call the D&D room, the disinfectant and downtime room. A special area on the farm where incoming supplies come into the farm. You can see the picture there. They're being loaded into a specific room, and they're disinfected before they come into the farm. Now, along the way, we discovered that we really need to have compliance. We need to document compliance that this stuff is being done and being done correctly. So I give credit to Dr. Joel Niram, who at that time was our health director. He's now our chief veterinary officer at Pipestone. He organized a series of protocols and audits and trained individuals to serve as technicians and auditors to come pop into a farm a couple times a month and really see if this is getting done right. So you got to have that oversight. This is a people business, this biosecurity stuff. We got to be able to watch and make sure it's getting done right. And then the question was, we started doing this on farms, and so this is like about 2004 or so, but farms still got infected. The percentage of infection went down, but it still wasn't good enough, and we started asking the question, well, is this virus potentially going in the air? And so what I did was I conducted a study when I was at the university again, and we looked out to almost 9 miles from a farm, 5 miles, 5.5 miles from a contaminated site, and we found virus in the air from that site. So we knew the virus could travel in the air at least for about 5.5 miles, and that's as far as we looked. So now we know the airborne thing is true. And we started putting together air filtration programs. So we set up test sites with filtered barns and non-filtered barns, and we tested those pigs in those barns to see whether the filtered sites actually worked. We would run these projects for 4 years, and we showed that the filtered systems stayed free of virus for 4 years, while pigs without filters got infected on a regular basis. So all of this stuff is being validated now and published. And the application to the industry was start to use filtration. That's one of the reasons I went to Pipestone from the university, was so I could study the effects of air filtration on a large scale, okay? And so I think right now in Pipestone, I think we have the largest number of filtered barns anywhere I've seen. We use the same type of filter, we use the same type of ventilation approach. It's all standardized, it's all audited, and I'm preaching to the choir, but I just want to let you know the background that goes into this. But then farms would still get infected. Farms, even very remote regions of the United States, say western South Dakota, that had the negative semen in pigs, they had the great mechanical biosecurity, they were air filtered. On occasion, they'd still get infected. That's really frustrating when you go to that length of effort and cost, and you still get infected. I actually just published a paper showing that PRRS virus could be transmitted through feed. It was a farm case where there was a feed outage. Feed was delivered to a specific bin. Animals that ate that feed became infected with PRRS. No other animals on the farm that ate feed from other bins got infected. We found the virus in the bin. We matched it to the virus in the pigs. And we took that feed material from that offending bin, that index bin, and under experimental conditions, we fed it back to pigs. And we showed they could get infected. That was the first time that's ever been done. So now we know how this virus is spread. It's spread directly, and it's spread what we call indirectly. What did that do? That just raised awareness that this virus can happen. And people started using mitigants in their diets to reduce PRRS survivability. We started paying attention to feed mill biosecurity, which was kind of an oxymoron before we got going. And we also now started looking at how do we bring feed ingredients into the United States from countries of high risk. So that really changed the industry. So that's the background. I give it to you very quickly because for a lot of you it might be old news, but I wanted just to review with you the science, the factual information that we use to put this next step in place, okay? Now we're going to get into the fun stuff. Now we're actually going to take all of this, put it in a next generation application, so doing all together in a comprehensive way across the Pipestone system, and measure whether it actually works or not. So you saw the publication. This just came out in January of this year. I think this is one of the more pivotal publications that has come out on PRRS in a long time. And I'd like to share with you what we did with the overall PRRS incidence across the company just by doing better biosecurity. Okay, so this project, it's called a retrospective cohort, meaning that we're gonna run the study, then we're gonna look at the data. Okay, it's kind of looking at backwards. What did we learn after we ran the study? The objective, as you can see, is to see if improved biosecurity can actually reduce the percentage of infected farms each year. Okay, it's very simple. New virus in, over the divided by the number of farms, gives you percent incidence across those farms. The time period, we did this the first year, July 1, 2021. It ended in June 30, 2022. That's the first year. And the results were so astounding, we wanted to do it again because we thought we'd potentially have gotten lucky. Let's do it again. So we actually repeated the process for another year, okay? And the data set was the Pipestone system, and I'll show you the numbers. So here this isn't a little experiment anymore. This is one of the largest production companies in the world, and we're gonna do this over time. And so we're gonna really measure if this works or not. And as I mentioned, we're going to measure PRRS incidence risk, so the number of new virus introductions divided by the number of farms. So the number of infected farms divided by the number of total farms gives us our incidence risk. We're going to make sure it's a new virus. We're going to sequence that virus and make sure it's different. If it's a naive herd, it's easy. It's never had the virus. But if it's at a previously infected farm, we want to make sure it's a new virus, not the old one that's been hanging around. Because that's what we're measuring, is preventing new virus entry. And as we kind of looked at the data, it was interesting. We kind of accidentally saw that we had two different groups of farms. We call what we call NGB complete, Next Generation Biosecurity complete, farms that did everything in that little diagram. They had the direct and indirect routes. But there was also a subset of farms that weren't air filtered, for example. They were doing everything other than filtering the air. So we kind of had two different cohorts here that we could start to look at, kind of like an accident. And the hypothesis was that the better we do with biosecurity, the lower our chances of infection are. So here's kind of what I'm saying. We've got the NGB complete set of farms in the company. They're doing everything, as you can see there. And then the incomplete farms don't have the airborne system in place. They were simply too old. They didn't have the economic capabilities to do it. There had some decisions. They just couldn't filter their farms. So it was kind of an accidental separation of these two sets. So let's go to the results. This is where the rubber meets the road. And so here's year one. So again, remember, year one was July 1st of 2021 to June 30th of 2022. Okay, so across the Pipestone company at that time, there were 8 states involved in the company. There was 321,000 sows over 69 farms. Okay, so first thing that should strike you, this is not just a little backyard laboratory experiment. This is a big, big system, and we're going to follow it. And there were only 6 infections that first year. 6 divided by 6 of 69 is 8.7%. So the Pipestone system used to have a 30 to 50%. Remember that metric I gave you earlier? 30 to 50% incidence. By putting this in place, we took that down below 10%, which we'd never done before. Now, we're breaking out the data, looking at the complete and the incomplete farms, you can see that the complete farms did much better than the incomplete farms. Having that air filtration package is very important. And so you see 6.3% in the complete and 14.3% in the incomplete. So we started to see some separation there. That was really interesting. But again, this could be all just good luck that year. Let's do it again. Here's disease year 2. So we're going to start again in July 1st, but 2022. And we're going to go through the end of June in 2023. The system had grown, as you can see. There was now 9 states involved, almost 400,000 sows over 76 farms. And for the second year in a row, we got that incidence below 10%. And there you can see the breakdown between the complete and the incomplete farms, okay? I'd never seen anything like this before in the 36 years I've been working with this disease. I came out of vet school, fell right into mystery swine disease in 1988. I'd never seen anything like this before. So we have to write it up, and that's why we publish it, so you can all read it. So it's all open access. You can access this publication. Here's for visual learners, here's kind of how the years looked side by side. So we've got time on the x-axis, there's the disease year, and there's the percent incidence, so again, the percentage of new infections on the y-axis. And I think year 1 it was 20, it was the green, and year 2 was the red. They're basically parallel lines. So we actually showed that, again, in a graphic, we were below 10%. We did some statistics on this too, to see if the data were real. You got to run the stats to be sure that these just aren't accidental findings. So when we looked at the association of biosecurity level, complete or incomplete, and PRRS incidence was significant. So complete herds, 8.9%, the incomplete herds, 40% over the 2 years. And that was statistically significant. You see the p-value there, 0.006. That means it didn't happen by accident. It was a real event. That's what that number means. One of the challenges was, well, maybe you've got your complete farms in really remote parts of the countryside and you don't have challenge at the same level as you do around your incomplete farms. That's a valid criticism. So ahead of this, we went back, we do this routinely with our managed farms, is we map the farms, we map the barns around the farms, we go to the surrounding facilities and be sure they have pigs or not, okay? And then we see whose pigs those are. We start connecting the dots. So we know we understand the area density around each of our managed farms. That's one of our health director, Adam Shelkoff, that's one of his drivers. He wants to understand the risk around every Pipestone managed farm. For me, I wanted to do the statistics and look at the difference. Was there any difference in the area density around the complete farms versus the incomplete farms? And there was not. There was no statistical difference between the density around either group of farms. That was a big, big, important question to answer, okay? Now, across the 2 years, we did have some virus introductions. We weren't perfect. We had 13 new viruses, and you can see that they were very different. The percent heterology, or the percent difference, was 9 to 14%. So these are not the same viruses that are hanging around. These are actually new strains. So it happens, but overall, the system incidence, as you see in the yellow highlight, we went down from 50% in 2009 down below 10% for 2 years in a row. Again, never been reported. How are we doing in year 3? We're still monitoring this. Year 3 is the purple line. So we're just comparing it to years 1 and 2. We're basically in the same situation we were. We'll keep monitoring, we'll keep testing. If something goes wrong, we'll check it out. We want to keep sharing this with you so you can get confident in that what we're saying is true. So in closing, before we call up Dr. Stika Jensen to talk about wean-to-market, the conclusions we draw from this, and this is why this is so important, this is why there's good news in a tough time, just being better at biosecurity really works. In a big company, across many states, across 2 years, so not just a month long, a very extensive time period of testing, we controlled PRRS at a level that we'd never controlled PRRS before, at a level I've never seen controlled before. This is good news. And I think this is very applicable to other pathogens, say PED, influenza, mycoplasma, but also transboundary pathogens. A lot of the same approach would work very well for African swine fever virus if it ever entered the United States. So these investments in biosecurity give you a lot of return on. This is a very novel observation. Again, never been reported, need to be published. The comprehensive science-based approach was required. You got to do it all. You got to do it all. It was not perfect, but we will improve. But it requires discipline, it requires investment, it requires oversight. I can't tell you how many times these auditors went to these farms and checked on these farms and looked for any breaches, looked for any lack of compliance. And the farm teams that did well were highly rewarded. You got to change the culture, the mindset of the people, that biosecurity is very essential. Biosecurity works. You simply can't go outside, knock on the feed bin, and walk back in the barn again. Those days are over if you really want to control this disease. And again, to get Dr. Stika Jensen ready here, we're going to now go from the sow farm and we're going to go to wean-to-market, which is really where we need to go next. I think we have the sow farm figured out very well. But the better the biosecurity in the wean-to-market, the less challenge around the sow farms. So with that, that's why I say, yeah, let's bring up Rachel and let's get to her presentation. But we'll have questions, of course, but I'm very excited about this. I've never seen anything like it before. And I think it gives us hope in a really tough time, that if we know what we need to do to control this disease without any real rocket-like technology. This is just basic biosecurity. But we're doing it together in a comprehensive way, and we're making sure it gets done. Okay? So I look forward to your discussion after we hear from Rachel. And Rachel, the floor is yours.
Awesome, thank you, Scott. So my name is Rachel Stika Jensen. I'm a veterinarian with Pipestone. Originally from Northeast Iowa, went to Iowa State for both undergraduate and vet school. Joined the Pipestone team right after, and then I'm based out of our Independence, Iowa location. So I think that was a really great presentation, Scott, and a good segue into the wean-to-market barns and why it is important to look at biosecurity in them. So right, when you look at kind of the textbook definition of biosecurity, right, the goal is to eliminate or prevent transmission of infectious diseases into our barn. So what that means for the swine industry, right, is simply we need to reduce or eliminate pathogens either coming into our farms, or we also want to play the good neighbor part and want to reduce what's coming out of our farms if we would be sick. So really what it boils down to is just a collaboration of many different procedures, each which is as important as the next. It's all about layering that biosecurity so that if one layer fails, we have other layers to help keep us protected. So as you guys know, and as Scott kind of talked about, swine pathogens spread in so many different ways, right? A very common one that we often think of is the pig-to-pig with various secretions, whether that's blood, saliva, or feces. And then we as people are great vectors, right? We can transmit it very easily on our clothes, on our hands, on our shoes, as well as vehicles are another great method of moving around diseases. And then we can't forget about insects and other pests that also play a role, right? You see flies in your barn, but you don't always think about what they could be carrying on them. And then, of course, aerosol transmission, right? We see that often with PRRS, and it plays a big role in spreading diseases. So the big question is biosecurity important? We have a lot of opportunity to really gain when it comes to biosecurity. So what this graph is it shows mortality rates from 2021. On the x-axis is the different countries. And then the red bars would be birth to market mortality. The blue bars would be sow mortality, so the breeding herd mortality. And this is where we do not want to be number one, but unfortunately we are. So we are around 23% from birth to market mortality. That's a lot. That's a lot of pigs. And last time I checked, a dead pig doesn't bring you a paycheck. And so really, if we can improve biosecurity, we can definitely improve our mortality. And then when it comes to biosecurity, as you guys all know, we have absolutely everything to lose, right? We saw that in 2013 and 14 when PED came in, this mystery disease killing piglets by the thousands. And then with ASF, African swine fever on the horizon in the Dominican Republic, it's something we need to be very aware about. So as a veterinarian, I understand the importance of biosecurity, but at Pipestone, we kind of wanted to engage our clients and see what their thoughts are when it comes to biosecurity and how they feel about it. And so we surveyed them, and 90% of our producers agreed that there is a return on investment when it comes to improving wean-to-market biosecurity, right? That's a huge percentage of farmers and producers that think there's something to it. But despite such a strong passion and understanding of the importance, wean-to-market standards are just not well defined, if at all, right? We just don't have a set of standards like we do at the sow farms. And then if we do have a set of standards, the execution to them is not always done or not always consistent, right? How often do you see a really nice shower in, shower out wean-to-market barn, but that shower is used as a storage closet, right? So a great way where we could really improve. And so this kind of just shows all the things that Scott just talked about, right? There's so many different categories and things we look at the sow farm side on a biosecurity basis to improve and to protect those herds. And so we have all that information, right? The knowledge, the science that Scott just went over is so clear that there really isn't a question about it. And we know that the return on investment can be huge, right? If it costs the industry $1 billion each year, that's a lot of money that we're just leaving on the table. So we've set that expectation at the sow farms and uphold to it. So why, as an industry, are we not better in our wean-to-market barns? So we wanted to survey a few producers just to get and understand their mindset and kind of their perception of wean-to-market biosecurity and what that looks like. So we decided to create a survey where we just kind of got a general idea when it comes to wean-to-market facilities and biosecurity and how producers feel about protocols. It was a really simple survey, 7 questions, 20 total parts. We actually had our veterinary interns do it one summer, and so they even timed themselves to see how long these calls were with the producers, and they were really short, 5 to 7 minutes. A total of 42 producers were surveyed in the summer of '22, and so one of the questions we asked them was how much do biosecurity practices have an impact on health and return on investment when it comes to the sow farm? So I think to no one's shock, 95% of those producers said, yep, it has a high impact. So then we turned that question and asked the exact same thing when it comes to wean-to-market barns and biosecurity. Only 48% of them thought it had a high impact, right? Less than half those same producers thought it made a difference in their wean-to-market barns. We asked them the question, do you have a good understanding of how to implement an effective biosecurity plan in your barns? And they were pretty confident with all of them either strongly agreeing or agreeing that they would be able to do it. We then asked them to kind of gauge and understand, what factors are inhibiting producers of being successful in the wean-to-market barns. So we wanted to look at time and convenience, we wanted to look at labor, we wanted to look at knowledge, and we wanted to look at cost. And so as you can see, blue would be no effect, red would be high effect. So maybe it doesn't surprise anyone, but time and convenience were highly impacting these producers' ability to be successful. Then when looking at the other three categories, labor, knowledge, and cost, they have minimal impact on their ability to implement. So it's more, it's perceived that it's going to slow them down on their chores, it's going to be a hindrance, it's not that it's going to, they don't have the manpower to do it, the knowledge, or the money to do it. We then asked them to rank key areas when it comes to biosecurity as either low risk or high risk. So again, blue would be low risk, red would be high risk, in a couple different categories. So when you look at the top three high risk categories that these producers thought in the survey would be livestock trucks, aerosol, and rendering trucks as their biggest risk when it comes to biosecurity in their wean-to-market barns. Then when you look at the low risk, what they thought would be not impacting their herds and affecting their biosecurity would be supplies, feed trucks, personnel and employees, and mortality removal. We then asked them, how would you rank your biosecurity today on your wean-to-market barns? And 90% of them either said 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5. So they thought they were either average or above average when it came to biosecurity. So that survey was really good, kind of gave us a perception of how producers are feeling about biosecurity in their wean-to-market barns. And so we wanted to design an assessment that kind of gave us a standardized grading system for wean-to-market barns when it comes to biosecurity. So that way we could kind of take out perceptive and just look at the facts. It's 18 questions. It looks at 10 key areas when it comes to biosecurity. And to keep it really simple, we either said high risk, medium risk, or low risk. And then this assessment was done by all of our veterinarians on our team to keep it consistent in that sense. So since we've enrolled this assessment, we've surveyed 78 different enterprises, which encompasses 406 different wean-to-market sites. When you look at the scoring, so if you have a really good wean-to-market barn, everything is low risk across the board, you would score a max score of 38. If you have a site that is high risk across the board, you would score 0. So right now, of those 406 sites, the average score is 20. So what that shows us is we are doing some things right, but man, there's a lot of room for improvement to really get us to the next level. What this shows is those 406 sites and kind of where they rank, you know, high, medium, or low across those 10 categories. So we would look at location, animal entry, single age sites, feed, animal transport, mortality management, supply entry, personnel entry, site sanitation, and training and auditing. So we're going to kind of break this down and look at it a little bit. And as you can see, green means low risk, yellow is medium risk, and red would be high risk. So when you look at a really high risk area, or the highest risk area, according to this assessment done by all of our veterinarians, supply entry is the highest risk at over 60% high risk, which is interesting because in that producer survey, this was ranked as a low risk by the producers. So this just shows that there's a little bit of a disconnect into what perception is happening at the wean-to-market barns versus to what's actually happening. Another one would be personnel entry. That one would be, 40% high risk, and then another 30% or so medium risk. So showing that it is a big area for improvement. And again, this area was ranked low in that producer survey. So again, showing that there's a little bit of a disconnect. And I don't want to be complete doom and gloom, so what are we doing right? The good thing is, one thing we're doing right is single age sites. So we've learned over the years when we have multiple ages on site, right, and we have a disease or pathogen in there, it's really hard to get it out, right? We bring young, new, naive animals in, the older animals are shedding, gets them sick, and you just keep that fire burning the whole time. So we've learned that we need to do all in, all out management, right? Pigs of one age on site, and get them out all together as well. So it's a lot of information. So how can you today improve the biosecurity at your farms? So I like to look at the 5 Ps, and so we'll talk about each of those. So the first one is pigs. The second one is people. The third one is property. The fourth one is products. And then the last one is pests. So for pigs, right, a big area to look at is animal health. Are you sourcing your animals from a PRRS negative, influenza negative, mycoplasma high pneumonia negative, PD and the coronaviruses negative farm, right, a high health pig? Or are they PRRS positive, right, and you're battling with that on your farm? Vaccination status, right? If you're going to put your pigs in a very high dense area, like the middle of Iowa, I'd highly recommend they're vaccinated for PRRS, right, just to reduce the transmission of the disease. Another one to look at would be animal entry and exit of a site. I think we do a really good job of the entry of animals to a site, but then when it comes to the exit and the transport of those animals, we could improve. It's nothing more frustrating when I see a really great group of market animals going to market and they take tops and then we break with PD, right? That's just frustrating to see. It doesn't kill them, but they don't feel good, they slow their intake, and then once they feel better, right, they start to consume more, and then that producer is going to be marketing heavy for the rest of that turn. Animal transport's a very big area, you know, educating our truckers and sanitation of them and upholding to that standard. Mortality removal is another one, right? All of our sow farms have basically switched to on-site compost, but there's still a lot of wean-to-market barns that use rendering trucks, and that's a very high risk. Back in that biosecurity of those survey of those 42 producers, 3 of the producers did mention challenges with trucking, such as either a lack of quality truck washes or trucker training as a barrier to them being successful when it comes to biosecurity. So this just shows us that maybe we need to enhance our auditing procedures when it comes to truck washes as well as training. The next one would be people. So visitor regulations, right, our sow farms are extremely strict. We just don't let anyone come into our sow farms, but grow finish sites are very different, right? And so we need to ensure that we have the appropriate downtime. If they were at a dirty site, we don't want them coming to our barn and asking those questions. The other one would be people entry, right? At a minimum, our wean-to-market barns should have that Danish bench entry where they leave their street shoes on the dirty side and they can put on barn-specific boots on the other side. As well as biosecurity training, right? Educating our growers and ourselves on how we can do better and understand that biosecurity is important and right time and convenience might be playing a role in why we need to overcome that barrier to be successful. In that survey, again, 12 producers did mention communication and compliance specifically with contract growers as a concern. So this is another area where work with your veterinarian, your field staff, and those contract growers to educate them and make sure that everyone's on the same page. In that survey, 10 producers mentioned they specifically wanted training for their growers, truckers, and themselves. So this is a great way where if you have PQA training or something like that, tack on a little bit additional biosecurity training as well. The next one would be property. So as we know, site location plays a big role when it comes to the wean-to-market barns. Sometimes you are stuck with the assets that you have, right, when they're paid off, and it's a big bill to go build a new barn someone farther away. And so we do just have to work with our site location. And this is where the layering of biosecurity is so important, right? Maybe we can't be in the ideal location, but if we can do everything else right, that'll help us be successful. Mentioned this already, making sure that you have single-age sites, don't have multiple age animals on site. Site sanitation, right? Making sure that you are being very thorough in your washing and disinfecting of your finishing barns, especially with hot water. A lot of finishing barns don't use hot water. That's an easy area where we could improve. In that biosecurity survey, 9 producers did mention their location as a barrier, right? They're just in a pig dense area, but as I mentioned, it's all about layering. And then 8 producers did mention facility issues as a barrier, such as that multi-age site or older sites. And so this is where you could have a chance to sit down, look at your wheel, look at your barns and your assets, and see if you can find a way to change it where you don't have to have those multiple age pigs on site. And then older sites, right, make sure we're maintaining any issues that would be there on maintenance and that kind of thing. And then 3 clients did mention that they would like better disease mapping or developing health level areas to help them in the risk mitigation. A lot of production systems do a very good job of this already, whether that's their sow farms or their wean-to-market barns. but it is a little bit more challenging for that independent producer who doesn't know what their neighbors might have or what's going on. I think this would be a great challenge to us as veterinarians as well as the industry to see if we can be better about mapping our areas when it comes to diseases. The next one would be products. So Scott talked a lot about feed and how we can be better there. Make sure your trucker is wearing the booties and following biosecurity that way. Supplies, right? It's very tempting to go to site A, grab a bottle of seed, come to site B, and then start shooting pigs. Ideally, we need to disinfect that bottle and let it have at least a minimum downtime of 1 hour, just like our sow farms would do. And then equipment, right? If we need to fix a feed line and things like that, either have equipment and tools dedicated on site, or again, make sure we disinfect it and have that downtime before we bring it on site. And then the very last one would be our pests. So, right, rodents and insects are always annoying, so make sure we stay up on our bait boxes, fly control. Birds are another one, where, right, when that curtain's down and sagging, that's a great place for either birds or rodents to make a nest, so make sure we fix that right away to reduce them coming into our farm. Also make sure that we have that gravel area around our barn to reduce those mice from wanting to come in. And then don't forget other pests. I used to think bald eagles were very majestic, but once I see 10 of them on a compost bay, I think maybe not so much, because what's going to prevent that eagle from going to another compost bay and another compost bay? So covering your compost and things like that. So a lot of information when it comes to the wean-to-market barns. So where do we start, right? We need to start with simple and small changes first, right? And then eventually we can get to where the sow farms are. So make sure you focus on your high-risk areas. So remember, one of those in the assessment was supply entry. So make sure we're disinfecting them very well, and we have that minimum hour of downtime. So it's as easy as installing a shelf, spraying things, leaving it there, and then once that hour is done, you can use it. And then the next one would be personnel entry and training. So as I mentioned, that Danish bench entry should be the minimum standard to entering our wean-to-market barns, just to reduce our street shoes bringing in any kind of pathogens, ensuring biosecurity and training and education to our growers and why we do what we do. And then one simple one I've used in a lot of my barns with my producers is they often have a sink, but it's just cold water. So they make nice, small, instant hot water heaters that you can hook up to that sink, so then you can get hot water to wash your hands before you go in the barn and after as well. And then I wouldn't be doing my job if I wasn't talking about foreign animal diseases and biosecurity. So as we know, African swine fever is in the area, or in our hemisphere. And so make sure that you get your secure pork supply plans done. Essentially what this plan does is allows you to continue your business plan in a case of that foreign animal disease outbreak. And then if you want more information, check out the securepork.org. Then once you have those secure pork supplies plans done, make sure you make an account on agview.com. It's free. It's ran and designed by the National Pork Board. And the reason you want to is in a real-time health it gives you real-time health status of your site and any pig and feed movement on and off that site. So again, those state officials can look at that and see where your pigs and who's been on your site, so that we can trace and contain in case of a foreign animal disease. And then the last thing, I don't know if many people have heard about this, but this would be the Certified Swine Sample Collector Training. What this is if that foreign animal disease comes in the U.S., veterinarians will be stretched very thin. We'll be busy doing sampling, biosecurity, and of course, depopulations of sites. So the government has stipulated that if individuals are trained by veterinarians, then they can collect samples, and those samples can be used to test for foreign animal diseases. So this is a really good idea if you either have vet techs or on-farm personnel, like your manager of your sow unit or a supervisor for your grow finish, to be trained in this so that they could get tissues if necessary. And then this is more a reminder for veterinarians, but if you're a Category 2 accredited vet, then you have to check with each state, because this program is run by each state and not as the government as a whole. And so each state's a little different on what they require. So Iowa, for instance, requires a little additional training for that vet before they could train people, versus Minnesota, as long as you're accredited 2, you can train people today. What the training would look like for you or for your team, there's an in-portion lecture where you watch some videos, you learn about how to collect the samples. There's 2 tier options. Tier 1, you can only do some of the sampling, versus Tier 2, you can do all the sampling. And then the second half is you go on farm and you actually practice collecting these samples with a veterinarian. So collecting tissues like spleen and tonsil, collecting blood, oral fluids, all that fun stuff. And then once that training is complete, your veterinarian just sends that name to each state, and then those individuals are then certified to be swine sample collectors. So, wrap it all together. Biosecurity, why is it important in the wean-to-market barns? So we know biosecurity works, right? Scott D has pointed that out with all the different research. So on the wean-to-finish side, we really need to focus on education and training, right? And we can't forget biosecurity is a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year job with no days off, right? Last time I checked, diseases don't stop at the end of the sow farm, right? They keep going. And then just because you can't do every step perfectly, that's okay. You must do all that you can. So our goal in the wean-to-market barns is not perfection, but progress, right? And then the very last one, make sure you are prepared for a foreign animal disease, such as African swine fever, with having your secure pork supply plans in place, as well as having people be the certified swine sample collectors. All right, I'll turn over to Scott to wrap it up.
So we're throwing down the gauntlet here, and then, oh, this is your meeting now, and we want to hear from you, but we're going to leave you with a challenge on that slide, a challenge you may not have heard before. Have you ever heard anybody tell you that the reign of terror is over? We believe it is. We know how to control this virus. We know how it's spread. We know how to biosecure it. We showed you actual data to prove that point. We're not just making this up. We can't let this virus control us. It's done that since its existence 30-some years ago. Things have to change. And they might as well start in Minnesota, because that's where a lot of good stuff gets going at the beginning. And I think because of the knowledge we have and the knowledge that we can share and work together, we are now in charge of this virus. It is no longer in charge of us. So that's the mindset. That's the paradigm shift. That's how we have to start thinking. We just can't let this thing tell us what to do. So with that, it's your meeting now. Any questions? Any discussion? Any disagreement? All is well. You heard, I think, from one of the best young veterinarians. I'm one of the old guys. I'm leaving. But the industry is in great hands with the veterinarians like Rachel, Stika, Jensen. So I'm so glad she could join us and talk about what's happening with wean-to-market. So sow herd, wean-to-market, anything you want to talk about, the forum is yours. Fire away. Yes, ma'am. Sure. So question is, what's the protocol of the D&D room? The disinfection and downtime room is kind of where that acronym comes from. So this is a separate room on a sow farm. As you saw in the picture, the products are brought into the sow farm. The vendor doesn't come into the room. He or she hands the products to the manager, who enters that room through a locked door and puts on coveralls and boots and gloves. And then the manager then takes the products, sprays them down with disinfectant, lets them sit for an hour. It's basically a room temperature facility, although there is an infrared heater up in the ceiling to provide some heat to enhance evaporation and drying. So it's really, it's not a very long downtime period, but that's the science we did many years ago that showed with PRRS virus, that's all you really need to do. Did I miss anything, Rachel? Okay. That's the D&D procedure that we've been using for, since 2000 probably, so. What disinfectant products? Currently we're using the Atmosphere product, Egg Forte Pro. Historically we've used some Synergize. I think both are very good. However, the effects of the Synergize on people are a little harsh. And so the Atmosphere product's very easy to work with for the eyes and the nose. So that's the primary one we're using now, and that's been validated by me several times. So that's what we're using. Thank you for those questions. Good question. So on the air filtration side, any difference between positive pressure and negative pressure ventilation? Great. So the story behind air filtration was in, I think it was 2004, I had just shown that the PRRS virus 184, which was a new strain at that time, could actually travel by air. And that had never been shown before. All the previous viruses of PRRS could not go long distances. That's the one I talked about going 9.2 kilometers or 5.5 miles. That's the 184 strain. And now the PRRS virus is very airborne in all of the new variants as well. So that's one of the tricky things about this virus. It continues to change and evade and transmit even more efficiently. So in 2004, I went to France, and in Brittany, France, which is kind of like the Iowa of France, they were using air filtration, the first group to ever study that, and they all had a positive pressure system. But it was a HEPA filter, and it was the pressure, if you remember leaving the Metrodome when the Metrodome was still up, it almost blows you out the door. So there was a very high level of pressure. And it was very effective, but when I came back to the United States in 2004, I realized we couldn't do that to make it cost-effective across all of our barns because we're mostly negative pressure ventilation. Long story, but I'll get to your answer. So that's how we initially set this up. We took the filter down from a HEPA to a MERV 14, which is lower efficiency. So from a 99.9% particle capture, we took it down to about a 75% particle capture to balance airflow and cost. So that's the unit we use in Pipestone, and we do all the farms the same way. All the farms are negative pressure in Pipestone. We have no positive pressure barns. I'm a proponent of positive pressure. I think the designs are getting better now. The early designs I didn't think had enough internal pressure to get the airflow force you needed at the far end of the fairing house, for example, with a real stiff northwest wind blowing against the shutter. So we're more experienced with negative pressure, although I know positive pressure is coming on. I'm all for either one. I don't really care which one you use. I don't make money on filter sales or anything. I think the air filtration ability, the efficacy of air filtration is so well documented, and you saw some data, that's where I would go with it. Do whatever you want, but consider that strategy. Yes, sir. Yeah, that's a good, how do the farms get infected? That's $1 million question. Rachel may want to comment on that. She's done a lot of investigations, which is a requirement. Every barn that breaks, we take one of the veterinarians and they go out and independent do an examination. So Rachel has done quite a few of those. And what do you think happened?
Yeah, I would say of the investigations of the sow farms that break, not all of them are successful at finding that silver bullet that did that farm in. Usually it could be a couple things, but a lot of it is more probably aerosol than anything, especially the ones that aren't filtered where we can't control that.
One of the things we've learned with this new variant, say the 144 lineage 1C, is the infectious dose is much lower to infect a pig than some of the older strains. And so it takes less virus to cause an infection, basically. And with to her point about the filtration, yes or no, filtered barns do fail, as you saw. And I think sometimes the filters are aged, they're older. But I think this virus is challenging because the infectious dose is so low. And these aren't HEPA filtered barns. So they're not 100% for particle capture. So, but it's really hard to find that smoking gun, like she was saying. Mel. Okay, so this is Mel Jones. He's asked a question about our transboundary studies that have shown viruses move from one country to another through feed imports. And that actually happened in the country of Chile. We reported for the first time that Seneca virus got into the country of Chile, which was a negative country for vesicular diseases, through imports of soybean meal from China, Brazil, and the U.S., which are all endemically infected with soybean meal. So this was Seneca virus. So this was the first documented transboundary excursion and incursion of a viral pathogen through a feed import. And what we're doing at Pipestone, we have a responsible imports program when we're bringing in ingredients from countries that have certain diseases we don't want, they go into a designated warehouse overseen by a group called SAM Nutrition in Minnesota, and they sit in a quarantine room for 30 days at 75 degrees Fahrenheit. We've actually shown you can even lower that to 68 degrees Fahrenheit, but it's a stable, constant temperature for a 30-day period. It's like isolating breeding stock. We're isolating feed now as it's coming in from high-risk countries. So it's a very different behavior shift that the feed risk, which is a new discovery, has changed. Good questions. So how many think the reign of terror is over? Hey, Dr. Oken. All right, 2, 3. Hey, Vitelio, good job. Okay. Only 3? I didn't do a very good job. Anyway. No, this is new material. You got to think about it. You got to synthesize it. You got to ruminate on it a little bit. But to me, it's the most exciting information about PRRS that I've seen in 36 years. We showed that we can control this disease. We can make it better for the farmers. We can make it better for the animals. We actually documented it, and now it's published in the National Library of Medicine. And it's free for anybody to read it. So, best way to spread the word, I guess. Kevin.
So the question was, right, with biosecurity, we're looking for progress, not perfection, and with some guys that are also crop growers with the pigs, do we see maybe a lapse around harvest? Harvest fever definitely seems like it kicks in. I would say a little bit, yeah. It's very common right around planting and around harvest. My phone goes quiet for a little bit, and then once they have time to get back in the barns, it blows up pretty quick. So it's kind of where it comes back to their perspective on time and convenience, right? They're in those barns maybe 10 minutes, right? Making sure food, water, and air is good, and then they're back in the combine. And so maybe getting them to slow down a little bit and make sure they spend a bit more time in the barns during that critical time, or doing a better job of hiring someone that can cover the barns while they're in the fields.
Very good. Anything else?
Yeah, good question. So on the feed side, right, at the sow farm, we do a really good job where they follow that pyramid, right? Healthy sow farms to less healthy sow farms. They wear booties. If they get out of the truck and get into the truck, they should be wiping down their truck as well, right? The wheels and the floor mats. It'd be nice to see the same thing in grow finish, right? When it comes to feed mitigants, from a cost perspective, it's just not economical right now to put feed mitigants into our wean-to-market barns, but doesn't mean that the feed driver can't do more to help. Wearing booties, it's often I see feed truck drivers at wean-to-finish sites that have no PPE on whatsoever. And working with your mill, seeing if you can try to follow a biosecurity pyramid on the wean-to-market side, right? If there are known positive PD or PRRS sites, right? Hopefully they could feed those last in the beginning of the day, do the healthier sites. In a perfect world, right, washing the wheels would be beneficial, but again, I think it's baby steps to get us there.
Anything else? Did you learn something new today? Did you see something you've never seen before today? Yeah, that's what we hope you got out of this, was there's new information, there's practical ways of solving this problem, and putting it all together in a science-based, comprehensive approach actually works in the real world. Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you all for coming, and enjoy the rest of the meeting, and thanks, Rachel, for helping me out.